Somebody's going to ask my children what their dad did when George Floyd was killed, and they are not going to say nothing. That's not going to happen.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to When the Moment Chooses You. And I am your host, Coach Charlene, and I'm extremely honored and excited today to have Sean Smith with me on the podcast. And I'm just going to tell you guys right now, you're going to be blessed by everything that he has to say. So, Sean, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, Charlene, it's so good to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah. So, Sean, I usually read the bio just because I kind of want to read your bio if you don't mind.
Please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So let me read a little bit about him, you guys, just because it's so amazing. So Sean is a father of two, a husband of one, an author, speaker, actor, poet, songwriter, and the owner of Elite Success Systems, a personal development and human healing company. At the age of 13, he was nearly killed by his next door neighbor in a hit and run accident while riding his bicycle to school. Police said the car was traveling over 50 miles per hour. Wow, there's a story there. I can't wait to hear about that one. Sean has dedicated his life's work to creating neuro-transformation in all areas of human behavior, an approach that blends numerous leadership and healing methodologies to produce long-lasting behavior change in the mind and body. He is one of the very few people to deliver two spoken word TEDx performances, Dear Racism, a breakup letter from a white man, and The Power of Vulnerability in Men. He co-wrote, produced, and starred in an award-winning spoken word short film with Lisa Nichol and David Bianca, I hope I pronounced that right, Let's Grow, about healing racism. And in 2013, he was named North America's Next Greatest Speaker. He wrote and performed a vulnerable, gut-wrenching 90-minute one-man show about the mommy issues called I Do, Mom. He founded a personal development coaching and training company in 2006, which has helped transform hundreds and thousands of lives around the world. Sean has produced over 3,000 articles, audios, and videos on nearly every topic related to success and leadership. He has over 1 million views on YouTube. Sean has spoken and trained all over the globe, including Canada, Colombia, Costa Rica, Greece, India, and throughout the United States. Welcome again, Sean.
Now, thank you.
Wow, that was a mouthful. So let me tell you guys how I know Sean. So I think it was in 2020, maybe toward the end of 2020. And I was invited to watch Let's Grow, this little short film. And so it just intrigued me when I saw the trailer. And it was a conversation about a Caucasian and a Black guy having a conversation with some spoken word. Anyway, it was just a beautiful short film. And so when I sat on that, I was blown away because we were right in the midst of the murder of George Floyd and all of the other unrest that was happening in our world. And so to see someone so strategically do this film was so profound to me because that's when I became a disruptor. And that's why, Sean, the moment chose me to begin to speak up. And so that's kind of where I got the name of the podcast, because I began to start sharing my story, speaking up, and talking about the racism that I encountered as I moved up through the ranks. So, Sean, tell us a little bit about Let's Grow.
Are you saying that the film inspired you to grab your voice?
The film inspired me. Oh. I would say it like this. It actually added fire to me. Because you know how it is. So this is kind of what happened. So I was very just disgusted, upset, and all of that, like most of us were from what all of us witnessed. And so I'm a person of prayer. So I went into prayer and I heard these words: what you do in this moment will determine your destiny and dictate your future. So I knew that I couldn't stay silent any longer. And so boom, then you guys do this Let's Grow thing. And I'm looking at it and I'm a part of this huge international listening session, it felt like. And we watched the film and then we had a chance to talk to so many different people from different countries. And it was profound. And so that just that ignited me. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do some listening sessions here at my
Ah,
place where I work at. And so that's what I did. I start having listening sessions. I first had listening sessions for the ones that were affected in that particular season. And then we expanded it to a broader group so that everybody can come together. And there's nothing like listening to another person's story, because you may not know what I've been through, but as a human being, you can relate to suffering at some level. So, hey, talk to us, Sean.
wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, and that it was an igniter for you. It was the whole moment was an ignition catalyst for me as well. I don't remember the month of that year, but somewhere around, I would say it was probably about a month after George Floyd was killed. Actually, you know what happened? When George Floyd was killed, I heard about it, and it was like, another black man has been killed by the cops, right? I didn't want to touch it. Not because I, as a white man, wanted to deny it. It was like, I didn't want to touch it. There was something about it. Like I didn't want to watch the video. I don't know. I just had this resistance. And I was talking to a friend of mine on the way to my office one day, and she's like, "How you doing?" And black woman. And I was like, "I just been crying all morning." And she goes, "Yeah, I've been crying all morning too. Like, I don't know why." And she hadn't watched the video or anything like that. So we had this like shared almost fear of touching it. And so I went into my office that day, and I was scheduled to do a breakdown of a coaching session with a bunch of coaches that I was training at the time. And I just had this intuitive thought, like, I need to be the client today. I need to have my own coaching session. And so I flipped the script, and I asked my co-facilitator to coach me in this moment. And I didn't know what was going to come about it. I didn't know it was really connected to George Floyd necessarily. But I got into this coaching session, and it was this deep, like 45-minute, 60-minute, snotty nose crying coaching session.
Yeah.
And what came out, Charlene, was that I wasn't talking, that I had something to say and I wasn't talking. And it was this super profound, I won't tell the whole story because it's a lot, but just profound like shift of, I felt like I was holding something captive in this prison cell, and then it changed and I was being held captive, but the thing that was holding me captive was me, and I was afraid of letting myself out. And it was this really, it was almost like a hallucinogenic kind of trip, right? But it was so profound for me. And it was literally that day that I started talking about racism openly on social media.
Wow.
I had been in the conversation for a long, long time, but always behind closed doors. And there was just something that was unleashed for me that day. And I literally started talking that day after I had this session. And it's very similar to what you said. What really got me was, somebody's going to ask my children what their dad did when George Floyd was killed. And they are not going to say nothing. That's not going to happen. And so it was the idea that my kids are watching me in this moment. And what am I going to do? That's what got me more committed to act than to hide, because it's dangerous, especially on social media. It's dangerous to get into conversations that are controversial. I mean, it's a battleground. But
yes.
And that is probably, even though I wasn't conscious at the time, what kept me quiet for a long, long time. And from the white community, the first shots that we're going to take are from the white community, right? Because we become dangerous if we start going, hey, what we are doing is not okay.
Right.
And truly, although I didn't have awareness at the time to be able to articulate it this way, that's what I was afraid of. I was afraid of like going into the battleground and taking arrows in the back, basically. And so that's what kept me quiet. But it was that idea that my kids are watching me, and what am I going to do in this moment that so profoundly important for our society. And so I started to talk, and I started to get into a bunch of conversations, and I mean, so much of my own ignorance was exposed, and a lot of my friendships with friends of mine that I'd been, connected to for decades was splintered, and some of them ended. And I just went on this turbulence, and I'm not trying to say any of that to, get any kind of pity, because I needed to experience all of that. But it was an experience that I wasn't prepared for, I would say. Mm-hmm. But looking back, that's the necessary piece. There is no clean road, especially in the racism conversation. There is no comfortable path. It's freaking messy. And it has to be messy, and it has to be full of fear and turbulence. And, and ultimately, this is going back to what you said, ultimately some kind of shared experience. So can I, as a white man, understand anything about the Black community's experience in America? No. I can listen. I can try to understand, but I cannot fully understand. And I think that's one of the first steps for us to bridge any divide is to recognize I cannot understand, right? But what's interesting about this particular topic is I have always up until recently, and I think the white community does this, we've denied the existence of racism, or we've denied that it's that bad, or we've denied our place in it. And I was thinking about this one time, and I was like, well, I would never say that I know what it's like to be a woman. So why would I say that I know what it's like to be a Black person? Or I would never tell a woman what she should do when she has cramps, or when she's on her period, or giving childbirth. So why would I say to the Black community, this is what you should do, right? Just put your hands up and obey the cops, and, do the things that we tell you to do. And so I was really intrigued by my desire to defend this particular topic when I never have the desire to defend anything else that I don't understand.
Right.
And ultimately I realized that it was because I have a stake in it. Because if I say that there is racism, then I know I'm on the wrong side of that equation, as a white person, right?
Right.
And so that was the stake that I had in constantly defending it. And you mentioned a TEDx talk that I did more recently than Let's Grow. In Dear Racism, a breakup letter from a white man. I just had this thought that woke me up one night, and it was the title, Dear Racism, a breakup letter from a white man. And racism just became personified to me in that moment. And it was like, we've been in this relationship, and it's going to end, because now I know what the relationship is, and I know how you've been manipulating me. And what was really powerful for me inside of that, which also was a part of Let's Grow, is that I had so many realizations about how can I keep my good guy status inside of a bad guy system. That's basically, what the impetus is of that poem. And the whole TEDx talk is understanding that I was trying to protect myself in denying racism, or using the get out of racism free card, right? I had a Black friend, and I dated a Black girl one time, and Black people live on my street. And, bless our hearts as white people, we do that because we think that's what racism is. We think racism is being in the KKK and actually secretly wanting to hurt Black people or Mexican people. And if we don't do that, then we're not racist. Right. And so, but it was my journey through who I am inside of racism. And it was a moment. I'm cycling through a bunch of stuff because it's a big conversation for me. So jump in at any point in time if you want to.
I will. No, just keep going. You're good. You're good.
Because this is all about different moments as I'm cycling through, right? Which
yes,
obviously is the reason that we're talking here. So the moment that really started my whole journey in the racism conversation was probably 10 years ago or so. I was talking to a friend of mine, black man named Dominic. We grew up together, played on baseball teams together, went to school together. Like we were pretty much best friends when we were growing up. And he was talking to me one time. I remember I was on the phone. I was in the airport and he was talking to me about systemic racism. And at that point in my life, I didn't want to hear about it because systemic racism meant that I am a racist and, you know, and all the ways that white people defend white privilege, like don't tell me that I didn't work hard and all this stuff. Right. And so I was like screaming at him in the airport this day. And then he made a statement to me. He says, Sean, I know you're not consciously racist. I grew up with you. I know your parents. I get it. But you've been produced by the same racist machine that made all of us. But that machine benefits you more than it does me. And Charlene, like I genuinely stopped talking. I stopped breathing in that moment. And all the energy in my body of I got to defend against this and screw you, Dominic, and all that, it just went away because I couldn't deny what he said. Right. And that's the moment that I started to look from a different lens. Have I been produced by a racist machine versus am I as a person racist or not? And that's what kind of started to lend me or cause me to lean in to this conversation. But even with that, it was years before the George Floyd moment that I told you about. And then it was several months after that.
Yeah, you said that was like 10 years ago. So
that was like the seed that was planted. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, you said something really important here. And I think that's where people don't understand it if you've never been through it. Like, I'll give you an example. When I grew up in Cleveland. So the whites were on one side, the blacks were on another side. It was in 1966-ish still. Mm-hmm. And so when I finished, I graduated school at number 8. So I did really well in school. But guess what? Because it was such a poor area, there was no resources, like there's no scholarships, there's nothing. And so I basically I went into the military to get my schooling because there was no counselors that would say, hey, I think you should apply for this, that. I mean, just the resources were not there. And so when you look at where we are as a whole and you see how tough, like it was tough for me to have to leave my family because we didn't have the money. We just didn't have the money, but the same resources are not available to me at that time as there were for my friend that I made many years back. And so what you're saying is so key. But what I love what you said is the awareness. It's almost like you had this aha moment. And that's when you were able to change perspectives.
100%.
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it was like, you know, as you said earlier, too, for yourself, it was like, how am I going to be remembered in this moment, either by ourselves or other people? And I think it's important that there's an intrinsic reason that we meet our moment, whatever that moment is, whether it's a racism conversation or a decision to leave a job or, you know, a relation, like anything that's significant in our lives. I think there has to be an intrinsic reason to do it, not an extrinsic one that says, if I make this choice, then something good will happen. Or if I don't, then something won't, you know, something bad won't happen. I think it's gotta be, I'm going to meet this moment so that I can say I met the moment.
Absolutely.
And I think until we do that, we're always going to be somewhat restricted or shackled by other people's opinions and other people's decisions. And then we're never actually fully committed to our voice just for the sake of being committed to our voice. And I think that's what keeps a lot of people quiet.
Well, and you just said something powerful, other people's opinion, because for so long, Sean, I have to be honest, I couldn't be me. I just couldn't be me because me was scary to other people because of the stereotypes and the biases that people have. So I was quiet for multiple years. I saw things that were not appropriate. I saw things. I'm strategically placed in a place of leadership and I just was silent. I was quiet. So I too had to make a choice in that moment whether I was going to share my story or not. And that's where I thought about that. I think it's by MLK. He said, the moment that you become silent is the moment that we die. I began to start speaking up because I said, I am going to live. I'm going to lean into this. I am no longer concerned about making anybody else comfortable, because that was my problem. I was like, I got to be careful. I don't want to make people uncomfortable, but like, I've been uncomfortable my whole life, Sean. I really have.
So you're sacrificing your own comfort. Yeah. So you've been sacrificing your own to make sure nobody else was uncomfortable around you. Well,
exactly, until the aha moment. Yeah, I had to make that shift, because that's the only way that I can be impactful, is to lean into the discomfort and be okay with sitting in a conversation like this with another human being, hopefully to bring some type of transformation or at least enlightenment or something. Because if we choose to be silent, just like in that moment, if I would have chose to be silent, all of the people that were coming to me asking and really just didn't know what to say to me in that moment, I opened my heart up. I said, if anybody wants to talk, I'm here. Yes, I'm hurt. Yes, I'm wounded. Yes, I have to deal with this 24/7 because I have little Black children, but I'm open and I want to hear. And it's been so beautiful, because that's where shared humanity can sit with another person. You might not know what I'm going through, but let me tell you about why I do what I do. And that, that has been so beneficial, Sean. So when you guys came forth with this short series that movie, it was that was like the most important movie, I think, of the year for me.
Wow, thank you.
It really was, because I watch intentional, purposeful movies. And that one was purposeful because the conversation, you guys you were leaning in, you were angry, all of the emotions showed, all of the history showed. It was just brilliant what you guys did in that short little 15 minutes. And then Lisa Nichols with that spoken word, I was like, okay, I'm just done. This was just the bomb.
Yeah.
So I got a question for you.
Okay,
I got a question for you. How tough was that to do?
Yeah, it was tough. It was tough. And if you don't mind me unpacking that a little bit, especially based on all the things you just said, you made me like physically respond when you said shared humanity. I think that's the key. So Lisa and I have known each other for a long time, and we've always kind of danced around the idea of doing something creative. And Lisa has always been like a closet poet. She wasn't. Let's Grow, I believe, is the first time anybody's ever heard her poetry, because she's writing poems, but she never published them, and it just wasn't part of what she did. So, and me either, really, up until maybe a year before Let's Grow. So we've both been kind of closet poets for a while. And so we just wanted to do something together. We thought it'd be fun. We thought it'd be neat, but we also are committed to transformation. And so we thought it'd be really good, a white man and a Black woman, because we are literally the farthest away from each other on the spectrum. What could we do to grab as many people in between? And so we were just sort of, like, one day it's going to happen. And then when George Floyd was killed, we just kind of looked at each other one day and go, this is the moment, right? We don't have an option anymore to not do something. And then she met David Bianchi, who's the other actor in the film. And he's been doing spoken word movies similar to Let's Grow for a long time. And he's a working Hollywood actor. So he has the Hollywood production. So him being brought into the project made the film a Hollywood product. Whereas Lisa and I were probably going to get on something, get on Zoom or something and create something that would have been good, but it wouldn't have been what it is until David was brought in. And then literally there's like 30 people that worked on the movie. Award-winning sound and color and video and everything. We're so proud of this piece. And so we, go to the set. Neither Lisa or I had done any acting like in front of Hollywood studio and stuff like that. And so me and David are the white man and the black man, metaphorically, but also literally in the movie, sitting at the table. And it speaks to what you said. Can we find a shared humanity? And as you know, you've seen the movie multiple times. It starts out where it's not that, right? It's anything but that. And this goes, I think, to the crux of your question that I'll get to in a moment. And it's this, can we sit at the table and literally look each other in the eyes and find commonality? Because as long as we are distant from each other and yelling at each other or staying with our teams, we're never going to find anything that's going to bring us together. And then Lisa in the movie is that bridge. She plays that role of really bringing us together. So there's a piece in that movie. You've seen it multiple times, but you probably don't know this piece about it because there's no way to know it until you hear what I'm about to tell you. There's background footage in that movie where David and I are yelling at each other, and it's black and white footage, and or some of it's colored, but it's B-roll, like over some of the spoken word poetry. And what happened was the director told us that he needed some footage of us like going at each other. And so he just sat us at the table. We didn't have any of this rehearsed. He just said, just get angry at each other. And so I turned to David and I'm like, what are we going to do? He goes, I don't know. We're just going to pretend like we're mad. And so I thought we were just going to mouth, certain things and go, rah, 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 right, and not actually say anything. But then we started to do that for a few seconds. And then I don't know if he said something or I said something. And then it was so combustible, Charlene, like what he was then saying to me and what I was saying back to him, it was so real, but so vile at the same time. Like what we were saying to each other was disgusting. And it was embarrassing to me that I had that in me. And it was embarrassing to him that he had it in him. But it was like, for the sake of this background footage, we touched something so deep that was like primal, but awful at the same time, to the point where we only went back and forth for like 45 seconds, but it was so profoundly terrible that as soon as we did it on the set, the entire set just went quiet and everybody was like, oh my God, what just happened? And here these guys, like we thought they were friends and cool. And now like, it looks like they're about to fight. And David and I actually had tears in our eyes. And as soon as the director said cut, we like looked at each other and went, oh my God. And we just hugged. Like we had to like let each other know none of that was real, but it was so real, like in our bodies.
Wow.
And then somebody on set actually she went around the whole set and sort of spread sage and kind of like wanted to cleanse the entire set spiritually because of how deep we went. So this doesn't make it into any part of the movie that anybody would see and know that story other than, you just see the B-roll behind it. But it goes to what your original question of how was it for me to do this? It was actually very difficult for me to be who I am in that movie, the first third of it, because in order to and I also want to be really clear, and it's very clear at the beginning of the movie, we know who this audience is. This audience is not the militant Black person. It's not the extreme alt-right white person. It's the on the fence white community. It's the people that want to say something, don't know what to say, are considering joining the conversation, but it's not safe. It's not people at either end of the extreme. And so I knew or believed that I need to meet people where they are in order to create resonance, right? Because if I just show up in the movie and I'm this activist and I'm like with the picket signs, Black Lives Matter, then I'm not going to grab anybody. There's not going to be any resonance other than the people that are already in the picket lines, right? Like that's not, that's not who we're going after. So because of that, I wrote the piece really from this earlier version of me, from the version of me that was yelling at Dominic in the airport, saying things that I was saying about white privilege and about just tropes, right? Racist tropes that aren't outwardly racist. And that's why I think a lot of white people will agree with most of the things that I said. It's not like I'm showing up as a KKK member or anybody that's like deaf to the black people. I'm showing up and saying things that we've been programmed to say and or believe in the white community. And that's what I want to try to get across. But it was still uncomfortable for me to just say some of this stuff. Like, it was cringeworthy. And for me, there's a piece of me that doesn't even want to say this on the podcast because I want people to feel it in the movie. But there's a piece where I call David boy.
Yes.
And I would say most white people don't understand the depth of that word. And I did, by the time I didn't at one point, but by the time we did the movie, I did. What was interesting about that is David didn't know I was going to say that. That was like an improv piece. And Lisa didn't know I was going to say that. So it was one of the final rehearsals before the movie where I added that in. Because I just wanted to add something that was like, let's get really raw and real here. And so I said, I called him boy. And he literally and in reality was like, did you just call me boy? I mean, like, he physically and viscerally responded. And I was like, yeah, man, for the role, my character did. I didn't, right? But my character did. And so I wanted to be extremely real with my piece, but also not over the top, right? To hopefully do what it's designed to do, which is let's meet people in the middle. Let's meet people where they are in each of the conversations. And there was a lot of things that David wrote into his piece, obviously, that was designed to connect with the Black community only. And then can we now come together and sit at the table and actually look each other in the eyes and find what you said earlier, that shared humanity. So one final thing, going back to your question, I was committed enough to the role, and I know it's a role. And I know that I knew that I had to play that role to my highest potential, right?
Yes.
In order to get the gravity of the just the gravity of the conversation. Like, we really have to get real and raw and truthful here if we're going to make any kind of difference. And that's what caused me to commit to the role. That was highly uncomfortable because everything I said in the beginning, I was like, I don't really mean that. I wanted to say I don't mean that. Right. I don't mean that. I'm sorry. I apologize. Right. No. I'm not racist. Right. But that's also part of my journey. And what has to be a part of all of these conversations is not just shared humanity. What you said, I think, is so powerful, but also shared discomfort.
Yes.
That we can sit in conversations that are scary. And Lisa and I got into conversations that were truly gut-wrenchingly unbalancing for me. But we had never been in those conversations before because we never really kind of, quote, had to, right?
Exactly.
George Floyd made optional conversations non-optional.
That's right.
For
Absolutely.
A lot of us. And that's what we wanted to do with this piece. So I know it was a long answer, but it was very deep.
Yes, because even the part that you were talking about, I literally wanted to wring your neck when you said, boy. It fits. I can feel what David was feeling in that moment. So you really acted it out so profoundly. So my question though, Sean, did you know the history already, or did you have to research? I mean, did you know the history of what we've been through? I did not
know. So the piece in the film, kind of the turn where I start reading some of that history.
Yes.
I did not know the majority of that.
Okay.
until researching for the film. And there were some things that David was sharing with me, about the history of lynching, and then I was doing my own research, and our director, Daniel Pico, was amazing. And he shared with me, like, I had never heard the song Strange Fruit. Mm-hmm. And he's like, you got to listen to that song. And then I listened to it like 20 times in a row that day when he told me about it. And until I felt it, like I wanted to really feel it, because why would I ever listen to that song? And if I ever heard the song, I don't know what it's really about. Like it's just a song to me. And so I was educated at a pretty deep level, to the point, Charlene, where I didn't memorize those lines that I wrote, that I delivered in that movie. I actually had paper that was in the book that I was reading from, because I didn't want to desensitize any of that for me. And so once I had those written, I wanted to just read them as fresh as possible on camera, so that the reactions that are caught are genuine reactions to me, and I don't have to fake it and pretend.
Yes.
And so, another piece to your question is, I've been studying this stuff for quite a while. I didn't know what Juneteenth was. I didn't know the history of so much of the lynchings. I didn't know, Black Wall Street. I didn't know so much of what's whitewashed in our history. And I've been searching for it, and I didn't know. Right. And I've been open to it, and I didn't know. So that's one of the really important pieces, I think, especially for the white community, to understand. There is a gigantic amount of reality that we were not taught. Of course, we weren't taught these things because they're threatening, they're dangerous, that we are not taught. And there's got to be shared education, right? Because there's a lot about the white community the Black community doesn't understand, and a lot about the Black community the white community doesn't understand. And I think there's got to be a bridge between our two communities. And I know I'm distilling it down into like extremely simple terms, and I know it's not that simple.
Right.
But there's got to be shared education, shared reality, that we can both go, okay, this is just the truth. This is the country that we inherited. These are the lineages that we inherited. This is just the reality of the history. Like it, and I don't think I wrote this. I don't think this is in Let's Grow. I think this line ended up getting cut just for time reasons. But in my TEDx talk, one of the things I talk about is the difference between white history and white mythology. So we are generally taught white mythology, where the white people are the good guys and there's no bad guys. We're the ones that did all the inventions, and we're like, it's a whitewashed version of history. And there's elements of truth in there, but not the full truth. And I think it's really critical for us, and I'm just speaking, to the white community, it's really critical for us to understand what we don't know. And then we can find our place in the entire conversation. But until we understand what the truth actually is, until we understand how the police force was originally created, until we understand some of the awful experiences that's, generational trauma in the Black communities, or just in any of the non-white male communities, then we really can't have these conversations unless we fully understand. And I'm going to keep going back to what you said, and find that shared humanity so that we can be on the same side. And I would say one of the biggest things that we need to do in this conversation of racism is go from me versus you. It can't be white versus Black. It has to be us versus it. Yeah. It has to be us unified versus it, the entity of racism, rather than some of us are racist and some of us are not as individuals, because we'll never get anywhere as long as we're trying to find the good people and the bad people based on who's a racist and who's not a racist. We're just not going to get anywhere that way. We're not going to find unity that way. But that's what we want for Let's Grow. And you mentioned it. Let's Grow is a movie, but we want it to spark a movement.
Yes.
And I know you've said you've had a bunch of conversations. The movie itself is profound and powerful, but what do we do afterwards? And that's why we developed a lot of the things that we did, to have watch parties and to facilitate conversations afterwards that say, okay, well, now, what do we share? How can we go forward rather than just, okay, that was a good movie and let's leave it, in the theater. We want to bring the conversation into the living rooms. And that's the only way I think that we can start to unravel some of this.
Well, I totally agree with you, because it doesn't matter how much you study or how much education or how many things that you do knowledge wise, until you really are able to sit with another person and actually unpack some of their history and be okay with listening to some perhaps very traumatic things and be there in the moment with that person, we're not going to get anywhere, because we can say that we did the education, but are you comfortable enough to come up to me, Sean, and say, you know what, Charlene, I really didn't like when you said that. You just called me A, B, and C, and that didn't feel good to me. Can we start really getting in those conversations like that? And we have to. We have to. When somebody offends me, like I think about how silent I was. It was so many things that I wanted to say it, but I just didn't want to get in trouble. I didn't want to make that person uncomfortable, even though I was the one uncomfortable. I was the one that was wounded from the words. But instead, I chose to be silent. I want to just thank you for joining me for this first episode, part 1 of it. We're going to share the second part on next week's episode. So I'll see you at the next episode. Thank you for leaning in with us with this very difficult conversation.